have just finished a report on social norms and how we can leverage masculinity, positive masculinity, to improve adolescent and young girls' health outcomes. And you're focusing on economic empowerment, focusing on SRHR, gender-based violence, and ending child and forced marriage. One of the things that is coming very clearly is that our men and boys are still deeply rooted in socialization that is very harmful, right? That one that is very controlling, that is very dominant, that criticizes their vulnerability, criticizes their fragility, and that means that they must always show up in ways that are harmful. GBV is a control conversation, it's an economy of control conversation. Child and forced marriage is around fragile masculinity, right? And it's saying that an older man can actually just marry a young child and there are no consequences to that.
That's what she said.
Kibera is an interesting community. It's a community that has lots of challenges. Women are exposed to gender-based violence because of poverty and all the interconnection of poverty. Many of them are living below $1. Most of them cannot be able to afford healthcare, including family planning. Kibera is said to be the largest slum in the whole of Africa. My name is Dr. Stella Bosire. I'm a medical doctor and a lawyer, born and raised in the slums of Kibera. My desire was for my community members, my friends I grew up with, to have a different life in terms of having money in their pocket and making better health decisions about their bodies. And so I started a program around the intersection of health and economic empowerment.
That's what she said.
Hi, Dr. Stella. How are you?
Hi, I'm all right. Good morning.
Lovely to meet you. My name is Dr. Hope Simiyu. I am hosting this episode for That's What She Said, the podcast. And we just want to get right into it. So I hope you're excited for this conversation since it's right up your alley.
Of course, yeah.
So before we even get into it, because we know you are a leading voice in the sexual and reproductive health space, we want to get to know who Dr. Stella is, your background, your upbringing, what sparked your passion and your interest in this particular field, and how you got to be where you are and doing the work that you're doing today.
My background, my first love was medicine. So I am a physician, an infectious disease specialist. I trained at the University of Nairobi and did my master's at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and the Strathmore Business School. And I went into private practice. Later on, there was a little bit of, like the nudge in me. The things were not happening, particularly in the sector around the health system sector. From a gendered lens, I felt like the systems were so disintegrated, were so siloed, were so out of touch with ways in which we look at gender within health systems. And I wanted to bring that to life. And I started doing work right from the beginning after internship around focusing on women, girls, and structurally marginalized populations around how do we improve their health outcome by nuancing how gender shows up, in health, and how it is if you're thinking about governance, you're thinking about financing, commodity security, even in issues around data, and bringing those voices to reach. And what I needed more expertise that I needed to understand, because lots of the frameworks around gender are actually anchored within the laws. I also pursued a law degree. I'm also a holder of a bachelor's of law from the University of Nairobi. Wow. And at the end of this year, I shall be admitted at the High Court as an advocate of the High Court. And so that's a little bit of why and what, but more so, I think for me, it's also driven by the data that we've been getting over the years around the health outcomes of women and girls, and looking at it where the shifts need to happen very quickly and radically, and what are the norms that need to change, because health is not just about the biomedical intervention, but also the behavior and the attitudes that really affect how women and girls access healthcare.
Yeah. Wow. You've given us now the thesis answer, and that is You've done such a good job. Now we just want to hear, who is Dr. Stella? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and if it
A little bit
influenced
about
now
my
your
upbringing.
decisions. Yeah.
I was born and bred in Kibra. I think all of us are aware. Many people know about Kibra. It's the largest slum in Eastern Central
Mm,
Africa. It's an unfortunate environment to exist because it reels and it's actually evidence of the inequalities that exist, the social economic inequalities that exist. But that environment
mm,
shaped who I am and who I became. Living in an environment where I saw most of my age mates die very early as a young girl because of violence,
mhm,
gender-based violence, because of
mhm,
sexual transmitted infections, including HIV, because of malnutrition for children who are raised by my peers who are also mothers, because of issues around income inequalities. And also just because of lack of access to information. If you think about
yeah.
reproductive health, is heavily based on access to information. And so literacy
Mm,
levels are very important. Not every one of them had the privilege of going to school, and
mm,
seeing that environment and seeing how I could be able to shift a couple of levels, what could change for my community to have healthy young girls, healthy women, women who are independent, have agency and making their own decisions around their bodies, was a dream I had from the beginning. Because also really living in that
mhm,
environment, I also come with scars, and part of the scars that I come with is that I'm a survivor of sexual violence, gang rapes, a number of gang rapes. I'm a survivor of gender-based violence. I'm a survivor of child trafficking in terms of sex transactions and defilement. And so
mhm,
all those experiences that I carry in my body really became my North Star to be able to direct the path that I wanted to take in life. One that looks at improving women and girls' health, and the other one that looked at the justice system. Because when this harm is happening, when all these implications, social and economic implications, medical decision implications are harming women, then there must be an accountable framework around where we can hold people accountable. And so my love for law, my passion for law really was born from that, seeing those injustices and growing within that injustice.
Wow, wow, Doc. I think you've answered even most of the questions we had, but that is actually such an interesting upbringing, and clearly it explains how you got to where you are. Now, you've mentioned a few of the challenges, not a few, actually, quite a number of the challenges that we see today with young girls and young women in their ability to access reproductive healthcare services. And I just had a question. Is there one particular instance that stuck in your mind, or one particular experience that was real and raw, that you were just like, what? And it's etched in your mind. And this woman or this child, maybe it was yourself, was not able to access this reproductive healthcare right or service. Just one experience. Yeah.
Her name was Ruth. She was so
Mm,
beautiful. I mean, she had this flawless skin. She was light skinned, but her beauty wasn't just her face. Her beauty was also her
mm-hmm,
character, her kindness, her
yeah.
generosity. And she was one of my
Mm-hmm,
close friends growing up.
mm-hmm,
And one day, Ruth just disappeared, right? And all of us were a little concerned what had happened,
mm-hmm,
where she was. And by the time we are discovering where Ruth was, Ruth had been locked by her mother in their house
mm-hmm,
because Ruth had been diagnosed to have HIV. And she'd lost
mm,
so much weight. It wasn't just HIV, it was also tuberculosis, and she was also pregnant,
yeah.
as a teenager. And so, as her peers, we were very angry at the way in which she was being treated by her mother. I mean, rooted from the fact that her mother had very minimal information about HIV, and this is the
Mm-hmm,
early late 90s, and of course, not just her, but the whole country was trying to just grapple in the understanding of this disease, and then the complexity around she's a teenager who's pregnant, and
mm-hmm,
also has tuberculosis, an infectious disease that really kills about 140,000 Kenyans every year, and for those who live with HIV. And so for me, I think
yeah.
one of the things that really took me back is the dehumanizing way in which we dehumanize, and I mean the society, including her mother, dehumanized Ruth.
Mm,
I remember telling the mother, let me go and feed her, let me go and take care of her. And I went, and she had lost so much weight. She was so cachexic. And I
Mm-hmm.
sat with her and I asked her, what do you feel like eating? She said, make me porridge. And I made her porridge. And she told me, Stella, I am pregnant. I now am starting drugs for TB. I have HIV. You know, what's going to happen to me? And at that particular moment as a child, I didn't have a lot of answers. That the answers, the only comfort I could give my friend was just to be there. And so I was just there for Ruth. Unfortunately, eventually we lost Ruth. We lost Ruth because of complications of tuberculosis. We
Mm-hmm.
lost Ruth because of the other compounding effect of pregnancy and HIV. And it really left a very deep hole in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't feel like it was a justified death. There's no death that is justified, but that was a blatant an injustice to
Yeah.
lose a young life. And it's not just the story of Ruth. I have multiple stories of young people I grew up with. I usually say where I grew up in the slum,
Mm-hmm.
there were two ways in which I lost my peers. It was out of criminal violence, gun-based violence, and police brutality,
Mm-hmm.
or it was because of HIV and safe abortion. And so these are realities that I grew up in. And it was not just one story, but a cumulative of many stories where I personally also
Mm-hmm.
went through those experiences that really motivated and inspired me to get into this work.
Oh, thank you so much, Doc, for that. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing. So now you've talked about your experience growing up and your background and also Ruth's background. And this ties a lot into our African culture and just how it shapes our reproductive health experiences. So you've mentioned that stigma is one of them, lack of information. What are some of the other things that have just shaped how we experience reproductive healthcare services from our African backgrounds?
I think we also have to really unpack how our African structures, both at the household and the community, are
Mm,
built. They're heavily built on
mm-hmm,
patriarchy and heavily built on power
mm,
and dominance and the presence of men leading. And so there are a couple of things that really affect
mm,
how women access and make decisions, or how they express their agency and autonomy when they're accessing reproductive health. And
mm,
one of them is decision making. Who makes decision? Because the
yeah,
decision is not just a subject of just the male presence, but it's also a subject of economics. Who holds the money, who
mm,
controls the house, who decides when and how
yeah,
this money is used. Lots of the time in our society, that is in the hands of men.
mm,
And so that means that women always have to seek permission around that. And so this permissibility has become one of
mm,
the things that is holding women around living their highest standard, enjoying their highest standard of reproductive health. When you also think about
mm,
within that patriarchy, also norms, practices,
yeah,
behavior around individuals and the community. Ergonomic behavior is something that is celebrated.
mm,
Masculine dominant traits around control, is something that is
yeah,
celebrated. And control of the private in the public space, for instance, where we're saying that issues around private issues for women, for example, around access to contraception, decisions around access to safe abortion services, decision around access to their own resources, and have been infringed and brought to the public. And how it is that we see this being expressed is in the laws that we see. We have multiple laws within this continent that
mm,
really restrict women access to information, access to commodities like contraception, access to healthcare, because
yeah,
reproductive health is healthcare. And when you think about all these
mm,
norms and where they are really and how they are anchored within the community, it's anchored also within religious and
yeah,
cultural practices, particularly around religious practices. One of the greatest opposition that we're
mm,
witnessing with the continent around reproductive justice really comes from the religious, interpretation
yeah,
and weaponizing of the scripture, both if it's in Islam, if it's in
mm,
Christianity, or any other subsect of religion. And so that tells you that if there
mm,
is work that has to be done, that work cannot just be availing the products or availing the healthcare workers. There has to be work that is done around social norms. There has to be
mm-hmm,
work that is done around shifting attitudes, shifting behaviors, unpacking what power
mm,
looks like within household and communities. But above everything, really looking at
mm.
ways that which women have been disempowered economically and shifting power back to women and girls.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I remember I was having a conversation with a young girl yesterday. She's a Gen Z, and we're just talking
Yeah.
about how even with all the things we've talked about that influence how we access and how we make decisions around reproductive health, the reproductive healthcare system, there's also a lot missing when it comes to our bringing the conversations we have with our parents as we are growing up. So it's still considered to be taboo. And that influences where, how, and what type of information ourselves, but also the young kids are accessing today. And I know we are in this whole debacle where misinformation is one of the threats that we are facing as a healthcare system. So I just want to understand from your experience, since you've worked with community, how has misinformation and disinformation impacted how young girls and young women access these reproductive healthcare services?
Let me start, for example, with one of my biggest body of work this year is around HPV vaccine. We know
Okay.
that HPV,
Yes.
papillomavirus, really is a
Mm.
known causative agent of cervical cancer, and yet
Yes.
we still refuse. We have a lower uptake in the continent, about 35% of uptake of HPV
Mm.
vaccine. And you look back and ask ourselves, why do we have um, um, a very low level, yet we have a very huge burden in terms of cervical cancer, in terms of death? Kenya, we're losing about
Mm.
3,500 women every year. And so actually we
Yeah.
found the root, and the root is misinformation. The anti-vaxxers have
Yes.
infiltrated our communities, have infiltrated our religious institutions, have infiltrated our institutions, our social institutions,
Mm.
our governing institutions with information that is linked, that misinformation, for example, that links the HPV vaccine to
Mm-hmm.
infertility, right? There is no
Yeah.
scientific basis to it, right? And
Mm.
that is a weapon that has been used not for a long period of time around vaccination. If you think about tetanus, there was a time even the
Yeah.
Catholic Association, professional association, even had to give us a position around that. And as healthcare
Mm.
workers, we have to come out and use science to really demystify some of those myths, because it's packaged in terms of science and in terms of wellness and the best for the public, but really it's
Yeah.
poisonous information that does not lead to public good.
Mm.
Think about comprehensive sexuality education. We talk, and that Gen Z you spoke to really is very right, and very,
Mm-hmm.
to some of the struggles that we are having is that parents have not been taught parenting, particularly around conversations on sexual and reproductive
Yes.
health information.
Mm.
And so the lingua, the packaging, the breaking of the ice is not a thing. If you look at the adolescent health policy in Kenya, which I was privileged to be part of the team to develop, we
Mm.
actually recommended a whole entire curriculum on parents, on communication for
No.
behavioral change. And the reason why we
Yeah.
did recommend that is because we realized that despite the fact that the children, the young people are exposed to the rest of the society, the one place where they start modeling behavior, where they start making modeling ways in which they make decisions, particularly around body autonomy and integrity, are actually within the household level. And so a lot of the
Yes.
times the young girls will go to their cousins, their sisters, what do you do
Mm.
about it? And those people, where do they get, if they don't get the right information from their parents as the primary caregivers? Then of course the net is the internet becomes the source, and the internet is not filtered. The
Yeah.
internet does not have appropriate information. I mean, also within that space there's also a lot of harmful information that these young people are accessing. And so all
Mm.
these factors around what is being shared out there around comprehensive sexuality education, for example, if you take contraception as another beautiful example that people use, is that if you use contraceptive as a young girl, you are going to experience infertility. That if you use
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's no scientific basis to it. There is a fear. We hear the fear, but in terms of just breaking
Mm.
that down and saying, really, that is not grounded on science, because studies have been done,
Yeah.
randomized control trials, which are the standard SI unit of scientific studies have been done, and there has not been any association or correlation of infertility and
Mm.
contraceptives that have been recorded. But all this information, the way it's packaged, I told you it's packaged around science, studies, these studies. But if you follow those links on those studies, they end to a dead end, or though some of those studies go to areas where in
Yeah.
sites that now expose young people into more deeply and harmful information. Those are some of the classical examples that I can use around
Mm.
misinformation.
I really like that. And I totally agree because myself, because I do a lot of health literacy on the internet, because I want to become a credible source as a doctor. We need to be more of us on the internet because fake news travels fast. Fake news travels fast and
Excellent.
it's very hard to combat that spread. But I
Mm,
totally agree. And you've
mm,
mentioned myths and misconceptions. So maybe I just want to give you the opportunity. You've talked about cervical cancer and infertility,
mhm,
family planning and infertility. Is there one other
mhm.
myth or misconception you want to debunk?
Oh my God. I feel like I have a whole entire list of myths and misconceptions around reproductive health, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
for example, I mean, maternal health is something that is also very important to me because, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking at our numbers around the causes of maternal mortality, and there are preventable causes from hemorrhage,
Yeah.
to infections, all that. One of the things that I have found
Yeah.
very misleading within the public is the glorification of labor pains, right? Is women being
Mm.
told, particularly prime gravidas, the first time mothers being told, oh, you don't have to go to hospital very early when you're starting to labor. Strong women, or women, if you want a
Oh.
better outcome, have to stay at home and labor. The science we tell
Mm.
women that the sun should not rise and set when you're still in labor, right? Then there's something wrong
Yes.
there, right? And obstructed.
Mm.
There's something really wrong. And so we must be
Yeah.
able to intervene. But I can't patograph when you're at home. I
Mm.
can't follow you up your progression if you don't present in the labor ward and the nurses to support that. And so many of these
Mm.
women come in with meconium grade 2, that they have had such contraction, and because the birth canal is not open for one reason or the other one, for the baby to come out, the baby has gotten so tired and has even had meconium, which is poop, baby poop, in the uterus. And the
Yeah.
problem around that they can aspirate, and aspiration brings in a lot of complications, including demise or stillbirth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're telling women, no, it's
Yeah.
actually the moment you feel a pain that you have never felt, come to hospital. The other one is around discharge, right? Is there's a lot of
Yeah.
information that is going around the kind of discharge. If you have certain discharge from your vagina, is oh, this one you can treat on its own, you can treat at home, or you just go over the counter. And lots of
Mm.
e-doctors and e-nurses exist out there. One of the commonest causes
Yeah.
of vaginal infection is candidiasis, but people have put
Yeah.
concoctions in their vaginal canal that is not medicine that is supposed to treat that infectious disease. And sometimes, if you look at the array of STIs, and that's
Mm.
why for me as a clinician, if I am to treat STIs, I usually do a broad spectrum treatment where I'm saying this disease can present as this disease can present as this disease. I am safer as a doctor being able to cover
Mm.
all those diseases as compared to just covering one specific infection. The other thing is around pleasure. I do a lot of pleasure conversations with
Yes.
women and girls, and which is anchored
Uh-huh.
around healthy sex, right? And part of
Mm-hmm.
some of the feedback I've gotten is around vaginal
Mm-hmm.
tightness. Is around what can I do to make my vagina tight? And so I've seen women and girls go to
Mm.
extreme, even putting corrosive substances. When I say corrosive substances, it's because our
Mm.
vaginal is very acidic. They put substances which are basic, and we know chemistry.
Yeah.
That will be hypothermic reaction, and there will be
Yeah.
heat. And the problem is that the rugae and the
Mm.
soft wall of the vagina now become burnt.
Mm.
And of course, that burning will cause fibrous tissue, and that fibrous tissue is what it becomes
Yeah.
hard, and it gets tight. You will have dyspareunia,
Yeah.
which is pain during
Mm.
sex if you don't use KY gel. You will never
Yeah.
enjoy sex. Even birthing process, if you desire to be a parent by birth, will
Yes.
be different because of that. But also
Mm.
the other infections, risking yourself to exogenous infections through your through your vagina, you're exposing yourself a lot.
Mm.
And so I speak to women and girls about Kegels, as a one way to strengthen the pelvic muscles, if they, for them, particularly those ones who've gone through SVD, which is vaginal delivery. I speak to them for
Mm.
to get used to, like, it becomes something that you get used to. But I also don't think really it's really about the vaginal tightness. It's also about the misconception around women must be tight. What is tight? The men's the sexual organs are not of the same girth. They are thick, they are thin,
Mm.
they are long, they are short.
Yeah.
right? And so women
Yeah.
cannot always have to adopt and respond to absurd standards that have been set for them to satisfy their partners, or
Mm-hmm.
particularly their male partners. It is really
Yeah.
absurd. So those are the common the things that really right now, and there's a whole industries that have been created around making the vagina tight, and which needs to be really completely
Mm.
fragmented, broken down. Yeah.
How can we bring men into this conversation, and what do we need to change to make them allies to support women's health?
I have just finished a report on social norms, and how we can leverage masculinity, positive masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
to improve adolescent and young girls' health outcomes. And you're focusing on economic empowerment,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on SRHR, gender-based violence, and ending child and forced marriage. One of the things that is
Mm-hmm.
coming very clearly is that our men and boys are still deeply rooted in socialization that is very harmful, right? That one that is very controlling, that is very dominant, that criticizes their vulnerability, criticizes their fragility, and that means that they must always show up in ways that are harmful. GBV is a control conversation. It's a economy of control conversation. Child and forced marriage is around fragile masculinity, right? And it's saying that an
Mm.
older man can actually just marry a young child and there are no consequences to
Yeah.
that. In our country, where we have strong child protective laws, we have strong family protection laws, and our constitution above all, it's still sad that we're still having to struggle with child and forced marriage. But anyway, just
Mm.
to answer the question that you've asked around what can we do, a couple of things, and borrowing from the report that I've just released around social norms and masculinity, one of the things that we must restructure, reconfigure what a man is, right? And the
Mm.
configuration is not to undermine the social responsibilities, the cultural significance of what male, but to reconfigure how ways in which we have platformed men to actually be causers or propagators of harm to women. So for example, around gender-based
Mm.
violence, right? It's I am the
Yeah.
decision maker. I am the one who speaks, everyone listens. You are a woman, you're like my child, and so if you
Yeah.
question my authority, I retaliate with violence to discipline you, and the language that is being used is discipline. How then do we
Yeah.
remodel men through positive masculinity, men that are kinder, men that are empathic, men that are non-violent, men
Mm.
that have better communication, even if there's a conflict with them, between them and their partners, for the
Mm.
good of the public and for gender justice ways? How do we use structures that exist that we have seen? This study has shown, and it's going to be released very soon, has shown that institutions like religious institutions, faith and cultural based institutions, are a very low lying fruit where we can rethink about the interpretation of scripture to the good of the society, to reducing violence, to improving autonomy,
Mm.
to supporting rather autonomy and agency for women, to reducing teenage pregnancies through how it is that scripture is reinterpreted. And there has to be ways in which it's not just the reinterpretation, but we must also have model fathers, model
Yes.
pastors, model sheikhs, model politicians, because what we have is riffraffs within the society. I mean, if you look at, I
Mm.
mean, a number of our political leaders have been muddled with it's either a harassment issue,
Yeah.
it's sexual
Yeah.
harassment issue, and so they cannot be the best model for our young people. So and
Mm.
having those men who have power and that power extending to the private control of women's bodies, those are the powers that we need to fragment completely and remodel and say, what does a politician, let me use one person that I heavily admire, is our former Chief Justice Maraga. He embodies calmness. He embodies respect. He embodies
Mm-hmm.
fatherhood. He's a non-violent leader, right? And having more of such men, and not just that
Yeah.
generation, but also our generation and the younger generations who are coming up, to see their alternatives to how it is that men can be shaped. The other thing is media, right? People do not know how powerful media is.
Yes.
The whole entire
Mm.
manosphere needs to be completely disintegrated. The Andrew Tates and his progenies, the Americs and his progenies completely need to be fragmented, because they are gatekeepers of toxic masculinity. And if you're going to work around really breaking that down, then we must actually deplatform these people. We've platformed them in millions of followers. How do we deplatform them and continue countering that narratives, their negative narratives that really is very consequential in terms of creating harm to women? That's one thing that we must be able
Yeah.
to think about. And then we must raise men, positive men with positive traits, right? Within that still sphere, the ecosphere, the metaverse, right? And
Yeah.
platform these men and celebrate these men the way we have been celebrating these ones who cause harm, and really push for those men to be seen, to speak, to influence,
Yeah.
and utilize their space for the good of the public and towards gender justice. Those, I think, those are very important factors. And finally, as a finish around media, entertainment media, is even in our creativity. I mean, the other day we criticized somebody, I will not mention a name, is that he met a woman and then decided that he's going to present the vagina like a whole entire tunnel. And we're like, excuse me, dude, we brought
Mm-hmm.
you here, we can bring you down. In record time, he
Yeah.
deleted. He's a very famous creative content creator.
Mm.
And last year, no, actually this year, there was a campaign that was carried by a lot of these content creators and influencers. And it was about how they show up as men in the society non-violently, particularly towards women. And let's have more of such campaigns that are being run.
Mm.
Let's have more hashtags. Let's have more conversations like this, where men are brought in to and a safe space to be able to be created for them to bring their vulnerability and ask the question, why are you threatened by my success? Why are you threatened by women going to school? Why are you threatened by women being economically empowered?
Mm.
Because it's only that until they answer, we are not men, until they answer that question and answer it honestly, then we'll still be hustling and haggling around getting men to support.
Yeah.
But finally, it is not the work of women to get the men. The men have to realize that it is their work. They need to educate themselves. They need to bring themselves. They need to do research. They need to bring themselves to platforms where they ask us questions, not in a
Mm.
condescending way, but in a way of how can I be different, right? Because this
Mm.
labor of women having to fight injustices, the labor of women have to fight femicide, the labor of women have to fight child enforced marriage,
Yeah.
poor health outcome. Can the men do the work? Let the men do the work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really, really love that. And I like that you're taking the approach of empowering the men who are actually doing great in society so that they can be a model for the younger men who are coming up. And also the reinforcing the narrative that it must start at home. It must start at home. So yes, yes, definitely points to consider. Now, Doc, as we wrap up, I'm giving you the mic. Where's your mic? Let me see your mic.
Like, yeah.
You have your mic, yeah?
Like,
So a question to you, and it's a
yes.
two-faced question. So the first question is, if you are president for a day, what would you change in regards to reproductive health care, in relation to young girls and young women in Africa and Kenya? And then the second question is, since you have a platform, what are you telling a young girl today who is looking to access these reproductive healthcare services, who is looking to empower themselves in their reproductive health rights, and they just want to be and live to be the woman of their dreams, their aspirations? Yeah,
On question number one, around one day as a president, I will listen to women.
yeah.
I will listen
Ooh.
to women. That's it. They will bring their lived experiences. They will bring their
Mm,
expertise. They will bring their scars. They'll bring the stories of their grandmothers. They listen to women. Because if I'm to break it around
mm,
legal policy, no. If those structures exist and they've
yeah,
existed and they've continued really to discriminate and undermine and disenfranchise women, they're not helpful. So I would listen to
yeah,
women. I am very privileged to have a platform that I use, and I use for good. My
yeah.
platform is a justice platform. And so information that is put from my platform, for example, is accurate information on SRHR, it's accurate information on governance, unless I have been corrected. And when I'm corrected on facts, I actually take a stand. But I refuse to use my
Mm,
platform for harm. I refuse to use my platform for to push narratives that are really not forthcoming in terms of making our society or our country a better place to be, or our continent, the continent, to be modeled. I use my platform. And so people who follow me and people who look at my work and read my work, because I also write, I have a column I write every Wednesday. Yesterday I wrote about
yeah.
about the budget at the Daily Nation. I wrote about the budget and what it has done
Mhm.
to persons living with HIV, but I broke it down around the women and the girls. Is that despite the fact that the funding has been cut, the government really did not allocate, actually took more money from the HIV, TB, and malaria fund instead of putting in more money. What does this look like? All the gains we have made over the years. And HIV care has
Yeah.
not just been about infection, it's been about cervical cancer screening, it's been about addressing teenage pregnancy, it's been about addressing gender-based violence. All these gains and of course including economic empowerment, we are going to lose it. And yet 353
Yeah.
million has been allocated to repairing a structure that every single day, every single year has a budget in terms of renovation, right? Just a distortion around our prioritization of what we need. So I use my pen to
Yeah.
tell stories and human stories and to challenge the powers that be, but also to really drive conversations within the community around what does proper working health systems look like, and I tell those stories. I also use my X space, I use my Facebook page. Mostly I'm on X, and part of the reasons why I use my X space as a feminist is to be able to continue deconstructing narratives that undermine and depower women, and continue elevating the place for women and girls, and to push for resourcing, investment, scaling of interventions that improve women's health, and particularly around reproductive health.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I think as a Kenyan, when the budget comes around, it's like you just want to lose your mind because you're just like, where are our priorities, to be honest? And it's true. If we don't prioritize the things that actually matter, we're going to move backwards. And moving backwards is not somewhere we should be going. Yeah. So now, Doc, the last question. You're empowering a young girl. You're empowering them to take charge of their reproductive health rights. What do you have to tell them? A young girl who's watching this today.
They got this. They got this. They have grown up hearing you cannot, you can't, you can't, you can't. The no's have been thrown to women and girls for so long. They got this. I got it. I'm here because I got this. Doc, you're there because you got this. She's
Yeah.
got this. She's
Yeah.
got this.
And that's what she said. That's what she said.
She
We love to
said.
hear it. And yeah, we want to hear more encouraging stories from young girls. Yeah, that's what she said. So yeah, Doc, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciated this conversation. It's very empowering, very enlightening. You know, sometimes you don't understand the depth of the challenges that we face until you get to like the root cause. So you've really broken it down well, and hope to have such conversations continue and just to see change and reformation in our healthcare system, especially in regards to women's reproductive healthcare. So with that, I just want to wish you a happy day. And that's what she said.
She said. That's what she said.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
There's this lady we were supposed to do some research on. She's called Dr. Stella Bosire.
Yeah.
You did some research.
Yeah.
And you saw the good work she was doing.
Kwanza, she gave
her
me
story.
hope.
What resonated with you mostly?
She gave me hope. Coming from Kibera, I know she's a renowned doctor. We can do it, girls. We can do it.
Actually, girls from...
There's life outside our community. We need to get it. Yeah.
The fact that she was taking drugs, like it's at that age when the society is actually judging you are a bad student. Why don't you listen to your parents? Why don't you listen to your teachers? And yes, there is always, when a teenager is reacting, there is a reason behind why they are reacting.
And you should not react with them also. Someone should... Relax.
You should actually understand them, because now at Stella, she was taking drugs. Her teachers were like, now she's not performing well. She's not doing, so she's taking drugs. She's selling drugs
to students.
And she's actually in that circle of people that are being involved in your drug peddling. And then now when I look at her today, she rose from ashes, and now she's where she is right now. Even your community, the slum community, they can actually rise from ashes and come out, get over the drug problem, get over rape, get over all those things. Look at you, even you are assaulted, and here you are empowering your community.
So confidently.
They are proud of me. You see, when I even started the storyteller community project, I started it after I lost a friend of mine. Majority, she was trending all over Kenya. And when I say there's a story behind a story, that is why I'm saying when a teenager reacts, as a parent, you should calm down. At least there should be a reasonable one among them. Because she was murdered. You know, you are talking about drugs also. Girls are being introduced to crime. In my community, mostly in the slums, everywhere, police don't search girls. That is how their boyfriends are using them to peddle drugs, carry guns, knives. You're walking with your boyfriend. You know, when you're a man and you're walking alone, police atakushika, aanze kukusearch. But if you have your girlfriend, they assume you're a normal person, you go. So she was introduced to crime by her boyfriend after, she started reacting as like a teenager when she was in Form 3. Then her mom said, nyumba ni yangu. If you feel you're old enough, go out. And you have boys outside here
that
wanting
you, and you are beautiful.
And you'll go. Do you know what she decided? She decided to go. She went first. She got pregnant with her first baby. The baby daddy left her. Then she found another man. She was really pretty. The man was using. It is so sad. The man was using her to rob men in the Airbnbs because she's a very pretty light skinned lady. You can't, wezi shuku msichana anaweza kufanyia hivi. So you go to a club, and girls, sometimes you should be, unafaa kujua senye mtu anakutumia, because a man that loves you can't put you in such situation. Ati a man is taking you to a club, you go and hunt for men. Then when you're going to the Airbnbs, your boyfriend comes in, you steal from that. You rob them, and they even kill them. Then you go. If you start getting physical with them, what do you think they'll do? They'll kill you and leave you there. And unluckily, they robbed a wrong person. They were followed by the DCI. She was brutally murdered. A 22-year-old girl. Esther was so young. She left her first baby and her second baby, 2 different baby daddies. This is how the cycle is continuing in the ghettos. They are being introduced to sex work at an early age. They are being introduced to crime, teenage pregnancies, early marriages, you see. And they later end up dying like her. She was very promising. And when I talked to her mom to share the story, I've not yet shared the whole story because I don't have my own podcast yet. She was coming soon. Yeah, coming soon, manifesting. She was saying, I wish I had listened to her. I wish I had not reacted the way I reacted, because you're a parent, you're telling your young girl, 16-year-old girl, if you feel you're old enough, go. And there are people outside here waiting for you. Leave and come and stay with us. I feel like that story for Stella Bosire really touched me, and I remembered her. That is why I even started my need to help young girls, counsel them, be like a mediator with their parents, and sometimes offer financial help where I can. Though I don't have enough money.
No, it'll be there. It'll be there. And I think just based on the story that you've given, for me, that's what resonated when I listened to Dr. Stella's story. That she came from a particular place. She was brought out and she wanted to go back and help the people who are still in that space to come out.
Because there are a lot.
And she's doing this by advocating for reproductive health rights, because she's first of all, I feel like you need to clap for her.
Yeah, she's doing a good
she's
job.
not a doctor. Like, she overcame that, went to her degree.
Imagine.
She's a doctor in a very good, one of the best hospitals in Kenya.
And also, I think something else that I got from that is, though you said, there's always a backstory. Like, she had so much going on at home that it was this was a release. Even when you listen to her talking about why she was doing drugs, like, she just wanted to be in her own space. She didn't want to feel anything. So there was something she was shutting out. And that's very many young girls' realities. And you find that now they end up being used. They end up falling pregnant. They end up getting STDs and STIs and so many other things that they might not have the avenues to get help for.
Very true.
So shout out to her. So we've yapped a lot. We've talked a lot about many things. And now, just as a parting shot, Tikifunga, I just want to find out, what would you like to see done differently when it comes to reproductive health, and specifically women's reproductive health? Over to you.
Over to me. Hey, munipe mic nionge vizuri sasa.
Grab it.
So, one thing, let's normalize family planning for young adolescent and teenage girls in Kenya, because we can't keep talking about young teenage pregnancies. The solution is family planning, because as we have seen, our men are not willing to take the lead and to stop raping our young girls, to stop taking advantage of the innocence in our girls. So young girls, if you are active sexually, you need to take power over your womb, and you can only take power over your womb if you family plan and you know that your womb not only carries the future generation for you, but it is the bar between your future self being successful or your future self being full of poverty. That's my part in short.
Spoken like a mother.
And as a teacher as well.
And a teacher, yeah, actually.
So me, I have several. First, I would add the government if they can, like, offer gynecologists, doctors in those dispensaries, because in as much as we are suffering, but some don't even have money or even don't have access to health. So that is a part that I think the government, because if publicly you can't afford it, how can you afford it privately? Yeah, you can't. So the government should put gynecologists in those small hospitals to cater for us. And also number 2, we should inform our young girls with the realities of these contraceptives, educate them, their mothers, and the community at large, including the men, so that they can know. We are blaming them, but it is not actually their fault. Yeah, you see. Number 3, the perpetrators should be arrested. I will stand on it, let my feet break. The perpetrators should be arrested, because they're the ones who are continuing. They're actually small in number. If we do away with them, at least the community will be a safe place for our young girls. Remember, they are only young. We can't put all the blame, all the education on them, and we leave the perpetrators alone.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
so that's what I said.
Well, I think for me, I have 2, just bouncing off what you've said, and then I have the one I had initially. So the first one is, first of all, men should be involved in all these conversations. I think they have a very important role to play, because when you hear your parent or your dad or your father figure speaking to you about these conversations, it's very empowering.
Yeah.
So I think they really should be involved in this. And if there's family planning for men, please, when is it coming out?
When is it coming out? Hey,
Let's share the burden. Don't go. Let's share the burden. But definitely men should be involved in this conversation. And I keep saying this. The conversation is not just about pregnancy. It's not just about periods. It's as simple as, how does a girl wipe? You're a man. You're going to become a father. You wipe from front to back. There are very many men who wipe back to front.
Some don't even wipe.
Yeah. It's simple things like that. So, that is someone. I'm sorry. Wow. Hey, if that's you, please wipe. We're girls, just wipe. But yeah, it's such simple things that they also need to understand how to put the pad. It has wings. Where do the wings go? You know, a tampon or a pad or a menstrual cup or whatever it is that women are using or your young girls are using. At some point, you might be the only one in the house with your daughter and they just started their periods. What conversation are you going to have with her? So men need to be involved in this conversation. Then number 2, education is so important. And for me, it's not just education. Where are you getting your information? I think it's very important for us to find credible sources of information. Like myself, let me plug myself now. I am a medical doctor and I speak on health-related topics. And there are very many others who are coming up and who are already established, who can be a credible source of information. There's a lot of misinformation going around, a lot of disinformation, and that really is working negatively for us as healthcare providers. Because now you come at the end when, if you had this information before, you would have sorted it as soon as possible. So education, health information is very, very important. And I would hope that every young girl has access to this information. Then lastly, you mentioned something about pregnancy and poverty. This is just to tell any young girl out there who has gotten pregnant, it's not the end of the world. Whether you're 16, whether you're 14, it's not the end of the world. You can actually thrive and make it in life despite getting pregnant before 18 or whatever age society deems normal. So just for the young girls, don't feel like it's the end, but also please empower yourself to actually take charge of your health and take charge of your body, because at the end of the day, your body is yours.
One more thing. Men, please stay away from young girls. Ukiona mtoto mrembo anapendeza kwa uniform, pea bibi yako uniform avae. Kwa sababu, why are you being the reason why a young girl is going to miss on education, going to miss on opportunities in her life because you made her pregnant? And on that note, all rapists should be actually ganged in fire, because why are you even alive? Why are you raping our young girls? Please, men. And I would love that rape is talked about by fellow men. Like, I would love to hear the perspective of a man talking about rape about their fellow men, because sisi tunakangani kama tunawapiga na tuwapigi, tunawauliza tu kwa heshima, please wachaneni na watoto wadogo tafadhali, tumeomba.
With regards to what Heather is saying, the wife to that man, why are you attacking that young girl? Surely. Talk to your husband at home. And men, stay away from pornography. Actually, what majority of the things that you are doing are as a result of pornography. How can you look at a 2-year-old child, alafu kitu inasimama? It's not normal.
And we have to wrap it up nicely. Women and young girls need to be empowered.
Yeah.
Yes, they need to be empowered.
Information.
Yes, and to also know that to some extent, there's also the accountability they hold. Yeah. So also know that if I say yes, this is what I'm saying yes to.
These are the consequences.
If I'm saying no, this is what I'm saying no to. So empowerment is so important for young girls and young women. So.
One more thing before we go.
Last one.
And before we close it, if you're a young girl, you're from the slum community, you have a story you want to share, and you feel like nobody is listening to you or interested, you can hook me up on my TikTok page, Valerie the Storyteller. I listen, I give advice based to my knowledge, and I seek from other people also, and I won't judge you. Your story will help another girl outside there.
And that's what she said. That's what she said.